You think electricity is something that flows, like water through a pipe, like a stream moving from one place to another, carrying energy neatly from a source to a destination. That picture feels natural, it feels obvious, it feels true, but it isn't. The moment you flip a switch, you imagine tiny particles leaving a power plant, rushing through miles of wire, finally arriving at your bulb to light it up. That's the story you were given. A clean, simple story your mind could accept without resistance. Reality is not that kind. What actually happens is far stranger, and far more unsettling. The light doesn't wait for something to travel all that distance. It turns on almost instantly, faster than anything you intuitively understand, faster than your common sense can explain. So if nothing is really making that long journey in the way you imagine, then what are you actually controlling when you press that switch? Not a flow, not a stream, not a visible movement. You are triggering a response. Electricity is not a substance moving through wires like water through pipes. It is a disturbance in a system that already exists everywhere along the wire. The wire is not empty, waiting to be filled. It is already full of charged particles, already immersed in an invisible structure of forces. When you act, you don't send something across the system, you push on it, and the entire system reacts. It's closer to pushing a rigid rod than pouring a liquid. When you push one end, the other end responds almost immediately. Not because something traveled the whole length, but because the connection was already there. This is where your intuition breaks. You were trained to think in objects, in things moving from one place to another, cause here, effect there, simple, linear, comfortable, but electricity refuses to obey that story. It reveals something deeper and more disturbing about reality itself. The universe is not built on isolated things traveling clean paths. It is built on relationships, on interactions, on invisible structures that respond as a whole, and you've been ignoring that. Because it's harder to see, harder to accept, harder to live with. You want a world you can picture easily, a world that behaves like your everyday experience. But the deeper you look, the more that illusion collapses. Electricity is your first crack in that illusion. It shows you that what feels obvious is often wrong, that what you were taught is often simplified to the point of distortion, that reality does not care about being easy for you to understand. And if something as common, as familiar, as everyday as electricity is already this misunderstood, then what else are you getting wrong? That question should disturb you because it means your understanding of reality is not just incomplete, it might be fundamentally flawed. And the moment you start to see that, the ground beneath your certainty begins to shift. Now face the part that breaks your intuition completely. Electrons do move, but not the way you imagine. Not fast, not in a dramatic rush across the wire. Their actual drift is painfully slow, millimeters per second, slower than a crawling insect, slower than your own heartbeat. Yet the moment you flip a switch, the light turns on instantly. So something doesn't add up. If the particles are moving that slowly, then what just happened in that wire? What reached the bulb so fast? This is where your mental model collapses. Electricity is not about electrons racing from one end to the other. It is about energy being transferred through a field that already fills the entire circuit. The wire is not a highway waiting for traffic. It is already crowded, already alive with charge. When you apply voltage, you are not sending something on a journey, you are creating a push that propagates through the system at a significant fraction of the speed of light. The electrons barely move individually, but they nudge each other. That nudge passes along almost instantly, like a chain reaction. Think of it like a line of tightly packed people. If the first person leans forward, the last person feels it almost immediately, not because someone ran down the line, but because the push traveled through the connections between them. That is electricity, a coordinated response, a system reacting as one. And the deeper truth is even harder to accept. The real action is not happening inside the metal. It is happening in the electromagnetic field around it. The energy flows through space guided by the wire, not inside it like water in a pipe. The wire is more like a boundary, a guide, a constraint that shapes how the field behaves. You don't see the field, you don't feel it directly, so your brain ignores it, but it is the main character in the story. Everything you thought was central, the moving electrons, the visible components, is secondary. The real process is invisible, abstract, and completely outside your everyday experience. This is the uncomfortable shift. You are not dealing with objects doing simple things. You are dealing with interactions that spread across space in ways your senses were never designed to grasp. And here's the harsh realization. If your understanding of electricity was this wrong, despite using it every single day, then your confidence in common sense is misplaced. Your intuition is not a guide to truth, it is a survival tool. It simplifies, it edits, it lies when necessary. Because the real structure of the universe is not built for your comfort, it is built on principles that operate whether you understand them or not. Electricity forces you to confront that, not gently, but completely. Now comes the realization that cuts deeper than anything before it. Electricity doesn't just challenge what you know, it exposes how you know. You trust your senses. You trust what feels immediate, obvious, real. You see a light turn on the moment you flip a switch, and your brain builds a story. Fast cause, fast effect. Something traveled quickly. Something made the journey. It feels right, but it's wrong. What you experience is not reality. It is a compressed version of reality, filtered and simplified so your mind can handle it. Your brain is not designed to show you truth. It is designed to keep you alive, and those are not the same goal. Electricity tears that illusion apart, because beneath that instant flash of light is something your senses never show you. Fields stretching through space, interactions happening across an entire system at once, causes that are not local, not simple, not even visible. You are watching the surface. Reality is happening underneath. And here's the first harsh truth you need to face. You are not perceiving the world as it is. You are perceiving a version of it that has been edited, reduced, and shaped by millions of years of survival pressure. What feels intuitive is not what is true. It is what was useful. That means your confidence is built on a distortion, and it gets worse. The deeper laws of physics do not care about your intuition. They operate on mathematics, on abstract relationships, on principles that often feel completely alien. The more accurate your understanding becomes, the less it resembles everyday experience. That's not a failure of science, that's a failure of your instincts. Electricity is just the doorway. Step through it, and you find a universe where nothing behaves the way you first assumed, where cause and effect are not always simple, where what you see is not what is happening. And here's the second harsh truth. If you rely only on what feels right, you will be wrong about the most important things in reality. Not slightly wrong, fundamentally wrong, completely misaligned with how the universe actually works. You will think you understand when you don't. You will feel certain when you shouldn't. And that false certainty is dangerous, because it stops you from questioning. It stops you from learning. It locks you inside a version of reality that isn't real. Electricity breaks that lock. It forces you to admit that your senses are limited, your intuition is flawed, and your understanding is fragile. And once you see that, you can't go back, because now every obvious thing becomes a question. Every simple explanation becomes suspect. Every assumption becomes something you have to test, not trust. That is the price of seeing reality more clearly, and most people never pay it. Now you reach the point where the illusion of control starts to crack. You flip a switch, and the light turns on. It feels like command, like authority, like the world is responding to you. But look closer. You didn't create electricity. You didn't design the laws behind it. You don't even fully understand what's happening when it works. You are not in control. You are participating. You've learned patterns. You've memorized behaviors. You've built systems that reliably trigger outcomes. But that's not the same as control. That's alignment with rules you didn't write. And those rules can break your expectations at any moment. Electricity follows the structure of the universe, not your intentions. If the conditions change, if the system shifts, your control disappears instantly. No negotiation, no warning. That should unsettle you, because the same illusion runs through your entire life. You think you control outcomes. You think your decisions move cleanly from cause to result, like flipping a switch. You act and you expect the world to respond in a predictable way. But reality is not a simple switch. It's a network, a system, a field of interactions far larger than you can see. Every action you take enters that system and collides with forces you didn't choose. Other people's decisions, hidden variables, physical limits, random fluctuations, structures you don't even know exist. You push, and the system responds, but not always how you expect. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And you call it luck, or failure, or success. But underneath, it's the same principle as electricity. You are not commanding the universe. You are disturbing it, And the response you get depends on the entire structure, not just your input. Here's the harsh truth most people avoid. Your sense of control is a simplified story your mind tells to stay stable. It gives you confidence, it gives you direction, but it also hides the complexity that actually governs your life. Ignore that complexity, and you become fragile. You take credit when things go right without understanding why. You feel lost when things go wrong without knowing what changed. You swing between confidence and confusion, never realizing the system was always bigger than you. Electricity exposes this clearly. You don't control the current, you create conditions, you align with rules, and when everything matches, the effect appears. That's it, and if you misunderstand that, you make the same mistake everywhere else. You overestimate your power, you underestimate reality, and eventually reality corrects you, not gently, but completely. Now comes the shift that changes everything, if you're willing to accept it. Stop thinking in terms of things. Start thinking in terms of relationships. Electricity is not a thing moving through a wire. It is a system responding to a disturbance, a pattern unfolding across connections that already exist. Once you see that, the illusion breaks, not just in physics, but in how you understand everything. Your life is not a straight line from action to result. It is a network. Every choice you make enters a web of forces you cannot fully see. People, environments, timing, hidden variables, physical limits. You are not pushing isolated events forward. You are triggering responses inside a larger structure. That realization is uncomfortable, because it means you are not as independent as you thought, not as in control as you assumed, not as separate as you feel. But it also gives you something far more powerful than comfort: clarity. You stop asking simple questions like, "Why didn't this work?" and start asking better ones. What system was I acting inside? What forces were already in play? What relationships did I ignore? That shift alone changes how you think, how you act, and how you respond to failure. You stop taking outcomes personally. You start analyzing them structurally. And that is the difference between guessing and understanding. Here's the hard truth you can't escape. If you keep thinking in simple linear stories, you will keep misreading reality. You will expect clean cause and effect in a universe that doesn't operate that way. You will keep getting surprised, frustrated, and stuck because you're using the wrong model. And reality does not adjust to your model, it breaks it. Every time. But if you adopt this shift, if you train yourself to see systems instead of isolated events, you begin to align with how the universe actually works. You become less reactive, less confused, less dependent on false certainty. You start seeing patterns where others see chaos. You start understanding outcomes others call luck. You start moving with reality instead of against it. That's the difference. So here's the final truth. You are already inside the system. You are already part of the network. Every action you take is already shaping the field around you, whether you understand it or not. The only question is whether you stay blind to it or you wake up, question what feels obvious, doubt what feels simple. Look for the hidden structures behind every result, because if you don't, you will spend your life reacting to effects you never took the time to understand, and that is the real failure, not ignorance, but choosing to stay comfortable inside it.